Hello, welcome to your final and most challenging lesson on Photoshop masks. Let's get started. We're going to go to File, Open. On the computer, we're going to go into Art, Computer Graphic Lessons, Photoshop Lessons, and in there is a folder called Masks. You need to open up 3 files, so hold down the Control key as you click on Advanced Masking End, Advanced Masking Start, and City Street. You're going to need all 3 of these files. We'll get to the City Street file in just a minute here. Let's click on the masking end. So this is relatively what yours should look like. We're going to be taking an image of Scarlett Johansson and we're going to be putting her into that City Street image. We're also going to be making some changes to the color. So let's go ahead and pull the start image down just so that we can see them side by side for a minute here. So as you can see, in the start file, she's much brighter. We're going to be not only isolating her from her background here, but we're going to be making some changes to her brightness and contrast as well, and also some blurring and changing up the detail in the face. Okay, so once you're done looking at the end file, you can go ahead and close that file, and let's save the start file in your cloud. So File, Save As, saving on the cloud. Make sure you save it in the Lessons folder, and just remember, save it as Advanced Masking with your name in there as always, and click Save. Okay, so because this is our final lesson, and I'm going to be showing you how to do refined mask, we're picking the most challenging subject, which is portraits with hair. Very, very challenging, but I'm going to show you a quick and easy step to get your masking started, and we're going to use some artificial intelligence in Photoshop, and it's going to be one of those things that you'll wish you had known sooner, but I wasn't going to show it to you. So we're going to isolate her from the background, and we're going to let Photoshop do the work for us by going up to Select, Subject. So you're going to see a little pinwheel. It's going to take some time, and Photoshop is going to try to see where the edges are, and it's going to try to make a determination what is the subject matter and what is the background. All right. It specifically is designated for people, so it is going to look for things like eyes, but if you're doing things like still life, it does work. It just might not do as good of a job. It's actually meant for portraiture. All right, so as you can see, if you zoom in, it did a relatively decent job of getting all of those here. So we've saved ourselves hours of time already, right? Just by using this topic here. But we still want to refine it because as you can see, it left some out. We want to clean that up. And so that's what we're going to do, okay? So if you haven't done this, please stop the video and do that now. All right, we're then going to go ahead and go into quick mask mode here. So how do you go into quick mask mode? Right, it's this button at the bottom here. The first thing you're going to notice, why is mine blue? Well, I've made some edits to my quick masks, my quick mask settings. And this is the first time you're learning how to do this. So in order to open up these settings, once you are in quick mask mode and you've got your red film applied, you need to simply double click and it's going to open up this options here. And this is where you want to leave it unmasked areas. You can change your color. I changed blue just because it made it easier for me to see from the red. You can double click on this and make it any color you want. So if you wanted to make it hot pink or purple or green, so if you want to think green screen, you can do that. You can make it more or less opaque. If you want to, I'm going to leave it, I like it at 50%, but you can kind of meddle with it. Just don't take it less than 30% because you're going to have a really hard time seeing your masks. And then you just click OK. So once you're in there, we're going to go ahead and we're going to apply this now because now we're back in our selected mode. We need to apply this as a layer mask before we go any further. So with your layers panel open, how do we apply this as a layer mask? Right, we're going to click on that button. It's now going to apply it as a layer mask and it's going to block out the background. So this is where you can really see if we zoom in that it included a lot of stuff that we don't want. So we're gonna want to refine this mask, okay? And this is a pixel mask. And we're going to talk about pixel masks going forward. There are vector masks, and if you are really interested in getting deeply into masking, you can always YouTube. There's tons of tutorials on how to do what's called a vector mask, so it doesn't work on the little pixels. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. But it will work on algorithms, and it will cut across that X and Y axis. All right, so we're going to start refining this thing down. But before we do that, I want to show you what I call the ghost mode. So ghost mode, it just shows us what the stencil looks like without the image. So if you hold down the Alt key and you click on the stencil in your layers panel, it'll get rid of the image so you can just see it as the black and white stencil. You can see it a little bit more clearly. And you'll see that Photoshop did a good job of making some kind of like a grade. Remember how with masking, if you paint with gray, it's kind of there, kind of not there. And that's what it did with some of these areas here. It isolated it that way. And then if I want to go back, I simply hold on Alt and click on that again, and I can go back to normal view. All right? All right, so let's refine this hair. So in order to refine the hair, we want to double click on the stencil in our layers panel, and it's going to open up. It's not going to look like much change, but if you look over here to the left, you're going to notice we have a different toolbar. We are now in the refining mask option for quick mask or layer mask. You can do it with quick mask as well. And you've got several different buttons here, but the one you're going to want to find is the Refine Brush Edge tool. And what this does, and I'm going to zoom in before I actually do that. I'm going to zoom in. I want to zoom in on this because this to me is the problem part. Or actually, let's start right here. See how it left some of these things out. So if I click on this brush here, which is the Refine Edge, and I can increase or decrease my size using the bracket keys. I can subtract it if I want to. I can also add by doing the opposite. So I can brush across if you click on that. And you can kind of play with these around a little bit. Their brush tool acts just like the normal brush tool, but I would stick with your refining brush tool. And you just want to brush across that. I would keep it set on your plus size. And it's just going to look for any strand that it may be missed. This is the area where I'm probably not going to want to add. That's where I'm probably going to want to subtract. And it's going to get rid of some of those extra that you don't want in there. This refining works best for these really spindly looking little ones where you can refine and subtract from those. See how it's taking some of these out? Because I don't want all of those stray hairs. I don't need all of them. I'm just using my scroll button to go around and clean some of those up because it just included too much. You can kind of see where it's got the halo in between. I'm just removing a lot of that. It's just having the computer take a second look and saying, hey, computer, look at this. I think you got it wrong. That's all it's doing. It's just saying, take a second look. So you're just going to brush across. And let's not worry about, you can look at clothing if you want her body, but we're just focused on the hair here. When you've gone through your edges, you've had the computer double check it, then what you can go ahead and do is hit the Enter key to apply that, to apply your edge. Now we can say, okay, it's not perfect. We still have some issues, and I'm going to show you how to refine even more. All right, but before we do that, because I want to see what it looks like now, again, I'm going to go into that ghost mode. I held down Alt to see what that looks like. All right, before we go any further, we're going to add a background color layer just so we can see what's going on here. So I'm going to click on the New Layer button, and we're going to fill this. I'm going to fill it with a bright blue and move that underneath, just so I can see a little bit better here. And I'm going to suggest a bright blue to you, so stop the video and do that now. All right, we're going to refine this even further using the Dodge and the Sponge tool, which is new. We haven't done that before. You need to make sure that you click on the thumbnail of the mask. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this problem area over here where it's very soft, it's not very linear, so the computer's having a really hard time seeing where the hair is. And we're going to manually, this is the first time we're manually doing it ourselves. We're making those decisions ourselves and not letting the computer do it. And you have to remember, with this, you're either using the Dodge or the Burn tool. When you're using the Dodge, you want it set to highlights. When you're using the Burn, you want it set to shadows. Okay, so let's start with the Burn first and set it on shadows. Let's set your exposure about 50%. And we're going to brush across the hair. Notice it's getting rid of some of those. So what the Burn tool is going to do is it's going to remove the in-between colors. What the Dodge tool is going to do, set on highlights, is it's going to bring those back. I want to go with the Dodge tool there. Oops, I mean the Burn tool, because I don't want that. So think of The burn tool is going to remove. The dodge tool is going to add back here. I just don't quite need all of that. We're just refining it as much as possible. And you can always take the exposure up or down if you want to make it a little bit more subtle. This is, I gave us the most, probably one of the most challenging. She's got lots of little wispy hairs here. And don't worry, it looks really tough against the black, the bright blue. When we put her into that city street, it's gonna mask a little bit more, okay? When you get into this area, this is where you might have to manually switch to your actual paintbrush and do a little bit of blending. So here's how you blend with this. So reset your colors default, black on white. Remember, black is going to add to the mask. White is going to remove. So we want it to set to black. We're going to take our opacity way down. I want to make sure that we have a soft edge brush. And what I'm going to do here, I want to make it relatively big. And let's take our opacity about 15% or less. And I'm just going to brush across the edges of this so I fade her hair out just a little bit. Because when you get into these sections where it's not strands, it's more like chunks, you just want to soften that a little bit. So as it comes across that background, you just kind of don't see those edges. So you really only need to do it maybe to this section here and this section over here. Okay? So go ahead and try to get the best selection that you can around her hair. All right, next up now is to add our city street in there. So let's go ahead and pull the city street down. The first step in creating a good, believable montage is you need to make sure you're montaging into an image that has the same perspective. And that's really important. That's what gets most people, because you really can't fix the perspective much in Photoshop. You can, but that's really, really advanced. So your best choice is to just find something that's taken from the same angle. So what I mean here is if you look at these two images, they're both about shoulder width height, and they're both shallow depth of field. What that means is it's up close. So think about it. I wouldn't want a big, expansive city street that goes way, 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 way back in the distance. You wouldn't have that because the background is right up close to her, right? She's not in the distance. If she was smaller in the distance, I would pick a landscape that was bigger. But again, you want to make sure if you're looking down on the person, your background is looking down. If it's looking up at the person, you need to make sure that your landscape is kind of pointed up. So that's really important. And that's something that just takes some time and practice. And sometimes you just have to pull the images on and see what works. All right, so I did the work for you. I found a background image that's from relatively the same exact height, eye level height, and it's got the same what's called depth of field. So with our move tool, I can't get rid of these stinking hiccups. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab our move tool and we're going to click and drag that image on top of our image of Scarlett Johansson. And then we're going to free transform that using our keyboard shortcut, Control T if you want to. And we're just going to stretch it as big or as small as we want and hit that enter key. And then we just need to move it down behind Scarlett Johansson. All right, you can go ahead and close the original city street image if you want to. All right, if you want to reposition her, remember you can move her to the right or left if you want to. I don't care, it's up to you. I would not make her any bigger, I would leave her the same size. So next up is once we have a believable perspective, an angle of our camera, the next thing we have to do is we have to match those image adjustments. We have to match the colors, we have to match the saturation, and we have to match the value. So if I'm looking at the image that's in the background, first of all, you're going to notice it's much darker. So I'm going to click on the image of her. I'm going to go up to my image adjustments, and I'm going to go to the exposure because I know the exposure is just a little bit darker. So I'm going to drag that slider down. I'm just going to make her somewhat darker. Okay, we're gonna monkey with our lighting just a little bit more in just a second. And then the image is not the same color value. So I'm going to go up to image adjustment and I'm going to go to, you can either do a photo filter if you want, because you can actually use one of the warming or cooling ones. You can play around with these. I'm going to let you use your eye. It's which one you think matches it the best. I tend to think it's probably one of the warming filters, just so it matches. I'm trying to match this. What I look at is I look at what should be a similar tone and try to match it that way. You can make it more or less. All right. And now the next step is we're going to look at the lighting. We have to see where the lighting is coming from. So in this image, the bulk of the lighting is coming from this area and backwards from her, which is really tough to match. But what you want to do is you want your lights on the side that's closest to your light source, and the side that's furthest, you want that to be in shadow. And we're going to use an adjustment to do that. So let me double check my notes because I want to make sure we're doing this the right way. Okay. So we're going to add an image adjustment layer. So on the bottom of our layers panel, you've got your image adjustment here, and we're going to go to brightness and contrast. Okay. And right now I'm worried about this side of her face. I want it to match the brightness of this. So I'm going to take the brightness all the way up on her. Don't worry, we're going to fix it. I'm going to go ahead and close that for a second. And we need to apply it down to this. But before we do that, we want to fade it. I need this side to be much darker. But we're going to apply a mask to the adjustment layer. So we're going to click on the new mask button, which is a vector mask. And we're going to go ahead and grab our gradient tool. And this is where you're going to take some playing because it's always different. Every photo is going to be different. And in the gradient option at the top, we're going to make a custom gradient. I want you to set this to the left to white and to the right to black. And click OK. And click OK again. Making sure that you're on the farthest mask. You're going to go ahead and drag your gradient. Now, if I pull left to right, notice it's going to make the dark on the right side, which we don't want. If I pull right to left, notice what it's doing is it's masking that adjustment layer slightly, so it's making it darker. And I can play around with how far I drag. If I drag just a little bit, or if I drag further, it's going to change that up. So you just get to play with where you feel it looks good, the darkness and lightness. So now I've got some nice lights here, and it gets darker here. I think I want to pull it just a little bit more. I want to make her even darker. I might pull this in a little bit more. So that's just where that's a little too much for me, I think. There we go. That's better. I like that. All right. Now we need to apply it because I don't want to apply it right now. That image adjustment, it's affecting the city street as well. I don't want it to. I want it to be applied directly to this one. So in order to clip it to just the image layer of her, I need to hold down my Alt key. And I have to click on the line between these two. If you look, you get that little arrow. So what it's going to do if I click, now notice it's just on her. It's not on the city street. All right, and then the last thing that we're going to do here is we're going to blur her just a little bit because her sharpness. So we paid attention to the perspective. We picked a photo that the perspective and viewpoint of the camera is correct. We fixed the coloration. We fixed the intensity and darkness of the color. The last thing is the clarity. So the image in the background is slightly blurry. She is extremely crisp. She's extremely sharp. The details in her face and everything are really, really sharp. So we're going to apply a blurring filter. So we're going to click again on the thumbnail of the picture of Scarlett Johansson. We're going to go up to Filter, Blur, and we're going to go to Gaussian Blur. And we're just going to blur it. I'm at about 0.9 pixels, but if I turn it on and off, it's just showing you about how I can blur it more if I want to. You're just trying to match it a little bit. Now it's in the foreground, so it would be a little bit clearer. Then it's obviously not going to be as blurry as everything in the background, but it's probably not going to be as crisp either. Okay, and then I'm going to click OK. All right, one last thing I'm going to do is manual little tricks. I want to go ahead and I want to make some of her hair darker because to me this is still bothering me because it's not blending in with this background here. So I can do it one of two ways. I can either click back on the mask, and I can take my paintbrush and I can manually keep blending that in. Okay, that's one way to do it. I can also click on the image and I can use the burn tool, which is what I'm going to do. I'm not on the mask, I'm on the actual image. And I just want to make it a little bit darker so that it matches this whole side. I want to make a little bit darker. I'm even going to take my midtones and make my midtones a little bit darker so that she blends in here a little bit more. And then I'm going to come in, I'm going to click on the mask, and I want to make that edge just a little bit less crisp. Remember, our eyes are really weak. The human eye is really, really weak. So often you can't see real distinct edges. Everything kind of blurs together. So if you soften those edges a little bit, it makes it a little bit more believable. All right? So when you're done, I want you to pull up my end file and compare and contrast. See how well you did. Because what we're going to be doing for this final project is you are going to be using an image of yourself and you are going to be montaging yourself into another image. So as I said, there's another video for that. But when you're done with this, make sure it's saved in the cloud and make sure you do share it with me before you call it a day. Good job, everybody. You're done with masking.